Hey, welcome to Fire Engineering's Humpday Hangout. To our show, the issues and challenges in today's fire service. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my good friend and Humpday Hangout co-host, Assistant Chief Terry McGrath from Lewisville, Texas. And we've got another great show lined up for you with another great group of I'll call them family. They are family. Before we wind up too much here and get things going, I want to remind you, if you have any questions, head over to Twitter and shoot them over to us. Just make sure you use the hashtag FE Talk, all right, for Fire Engineering Talk, so FE Talk. And today our topic is all in the family, the tradition of following in mom or dad's footsteps. And we've got a great group of guests. Let me just introduce them quickly here. We've got Chief John Salka, retired battalion chief in the 18th Battalion from the FDNY, currently the chief in South Blooming Grove, New York, in Orange County. And he's got his son, Brian Salka, a firefighter with North Charleston, South Carolina. We've got one of our often returning guests. He should have his own show, Chief Scott Thompson from the Colony, Texas. And he's got his two sons, Braden, who's with Dallas, and Garrett, who's with Arlington, Texas. So welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us on.
Oh, this is going to be fun. It's a great idea Terry came up with. A great topic. Terry's like, we need to just talk family. Hey, before we get going too far, guys, also, Terry and I wanted to jump in there, and I could say this probably on behalf of the whole panel today. We wanted to throw a thank you out there to Chief Gary Ludwig from the Champaign, Illinois Fire Department. He's our current I-Chiefs president, and he has been to Congress. He has been fighting to help our career and volunteer departments with their budgets and shortfalls, and kind of remembering that we still have a job to do. He's been really working hard for all of us. So
a great voice for us.
So yep. Gary, yeah, exactly. Gary, thank you so much. And guys, I was talking with Terry early on, and for some of our viewers, my dad's the one that got me going to the fire department, the fire service. I was going to fires with my old man when I was little, on the southwest side of Chicago, in the suburbs there. And then I'll just pick on Lewisville for a second. Terry, Lewisville's got retired Captain Ken Swindle. I think he's still chiefing it. His son's on Dallas. Calvin Allison, retired captain, our good friend. We've had Calvin on here before, Terry. His three sons. One of the other captains, Dean Felposh, his son is on Grapevine, right? And then Captain Brandon Thetford's got a son that's on the job. Wayne Davis has one or two sons.
Two sons on the job.
Two sons. And then John, Jay Jonas's son, is currently on the FDNY. Is he EMS working his way towards?
Yeah, he's EMS. He's in that system where you get on EMS and then you take the next test and it's a promotion and you get a much higher chance to get on. Yeah, that's what he's doing now.
Well, and before, because I was going to talk about just mention Chief Jack McCasson, one of my mentors and idols. His dad, there's an Oak Lawn Firehouse. Oak Lawn's on the south side of Chicago there, named after his dad, and his son Mike's a firefighter. And you got the Jersey City sisters. One's battalion chief, one's a firefighter. We got Ray Downey, Chuck and Joe Downey, the sons following Ray's footsteps. Bill Carey from Firefighter Nation, who manages Firefighter Nation, Fire Rescue, and all that. He's a third generation firefighter. But John, just comment before we get going here with the guys. I was telling Terry, we were talking about Kevin Smith. He was on your hazmat unit. I remember Kevin taught my chemistry class at FSI. His daughter just got on. And I think that was through, explain the legacy points. I think it's a pretty cool thing they do for New York City cops and firefighters. When you talk about taking care of people, taking care of family, how does that work?
I mean, it's a great system. It's not as great as what they got up in Boston. I mean, Boston really has the ultimate system. If you got a family member that was killed on a line of duty anywhere in Massachusetts, you take a test anywhere in Massachusetts, you go to the top of the list. Period.
Wow.
Doesn't matter what your grade is, obviously get a pass. But our system is pretty good too, and it started after 9/11. So if somebody's killed on a line of duty, you have legacy points, and I got to double check, but I'm almost positive it's 5 points. 5 points is a lot of points on a civil service exam. Now, you also get 5 points for living in New York City, for being a resident. If you were born and raised in New York City and graduated high school there and you still live there, you're going to get 5 points more than anybody else that lives outside the city that takes a test. And if you're a veteran, a combat veteran, you get 5 points. So, I mean, a guy theoretically could get 10 or 15 points on top of whatever your grade is, which could make it, so that's one way to get on a job. But frankly, it's easier to get on a job through EMS without legacy points. You just join EMS as an FDNY EMT. You're a civilian. You're not a uniform member. You're not a, I mean, you're on the FDNY, but you're not a firefighter. And once you do 1 year as an EMT, the next fire exam that comes up, you take it just like the other 30,000 people, but you're taking it as a promotional exam. All you have to do is pass, get a 70, and your name goes ahead of everybody else. So if 200 EMTs take the test and 100 of them get 70 or better, they're number 1 through 100 on the list. And then 101 is the guy who has 115 points, who's a veteran and a resident and everything else, So that's really the way that a lot of guys are getting on a job now that don't live in the city, because you got to overtake the 5 points right off the bat because you don't live in New York.
Well, it's kind of funny because I was, one of the things I want to comment on, because Terry and Scott have both dealt with it, is the nepotism policy that Lewisville had, where we couldn't hire. We had to pass on so many great sons and daughters because we weren't allowed to. And it's the only time, Terry knows this, Scott knows this, the only time I think I was insubordinate with my boss, Claude King, who was a great city manager, because I could go in and argue anything. Scott, that you've been a chief a long time. Terry, you've been doing it. A lot of things go on behind the closed doors that the troops don't know about when you go and fight for them. And I used to try and get in there, and I would just always, and finally he says, look, I don't ever want to hear you talk about the nepotism policy again. He goes, look, it's over. It's done. I'm like, okay. And I went and did a keynote for Fort Worth's graduation for their academy. And I came back and I had a little meeting with him. He goes, oh, how did it go this? And I said, oh, it was great. I go, it was really cool. They had a couple hundred firefighters, and probably 15 of them, you remember the story, Scott. He goes, there's 15 of them. They got to pin their kids. He goes, did I not tell you that we're not talking about this stuff anymore? And I went, I know. I got it. I have to keep heading in that direction. And everybody remembers the best man at my wedding, Ray Hoff. We all know the Hoff family, Bobby and their dad and grandfather and all that stuff. And Ray used to say, yeah, I'm always checking to make sure the nepotism policies work in Chicago. I checked with my brother, I checked with my brother, the battalion chief, my brother-in-law, the district chief, my cousin, my nephew. He goes, and nobody can see nepotism anywhere. But hey, Scott, let's throw this to you. You and Braden and Garrett. So, I mean, besides having 3 of the 5 basketball players for the North Texas All-Star basketball team with you, as tall as they are, I mean, you have to be beaming. I mean, I know you are, but you're very good about. There's some people out there really go overboard. I don't know how you do it with your modesty. You got to be so proud of having your 2 boys on the job, Dallas and Arlington too, on top of it all.
Oh, absolutely, Rick. And I never really pushed them. I think just their exposure, you remember one of the first conversations we had when I took the job in Lewisville, their mom was also on the job, worked for Chief Halton in Cowpell, and she was on shift at the time, and I was coming to you for a division chief, and I said, hey, I got my boys, and you said, man, bring them in the buggy and put them on the red tar. So they made, if you were a duty chief in Lewisville, you were going to go to a fire, you were going to go to a lake call, you were going to do so. So I think, man, they just, being influenced you. We visited Chief Salka at his firehouse, and I think they just saw it. We're never pushed towards it, but yeah, it's great, and we can share and understand what each other's going through, and so yeah, it's super cool.
Well, in some places you see some dads and moms where they utch their kids into it, that kind of thing, and it's kind of like all the years dealing with my daughter's softball team. One of the things we used to tell a lot of moms and dads when I was doing the recruiting part for the colleges was, if you want your kid to go out to Bama, to Alabama, or UT, because you went there, it's your favorite, you like the T-shirt, make sure it's a school they really want to go to, and that if they got hurt, it's the same thing. If you push your kid into a career where they're not going to be happy, and it's kind of, I mean, John, I know we talked for years about, I know you were looking, you're going, okay, I got 5 kids, got 3 boys, got my daughters, and I know I'm like, okay, so is James going to go in? Is Brian going to go in? And it was like, no, I don't think it's really there. They're both looking at the Marines and stuff. And then all of a sudden it was, I'll never forget, Brian, not to embarrass you, when you said, yeah, I'm going to go test in North Charleston, which is a nice sized department, I think, 14 stations or whatever, busy for fire duty. John, I remember how you felt when he told you, and you kind of, you were so good about, I'm not doing nothing. Brian he'll make it on his own, just like Scott's sons and everybody else. And he did. And I know they love him there. I've heard Steve Gillespie talk about him before. Steve was a FDNY lieutenant to made it down there as he was a squad guy, made it down there as a training chief. I don't know if he's still there, Brian, or not. But John, you had to be bursting too, huh?
Absolutely. It was great. I said, mine had really no interest all the years they were growing up. And I was in the volleys, driving them around in the chief's car, picking them up at school and everything, being on the FDNY and all that. And that was fine with me. It was always with me that were or were not interested. And then, of course, they start getting bigger and graduating high school and college and going to move places. And, they both took the FDNY test, James and Brian. And then when he decided to go south, I said, listen, take a test up here if you want. Take a couple of tests down there. I'm sure not that I can get you a job, but I'll call around and see who's giving tests or whatever, who's hiring. And then I called down there, and North Charleston was the first name given to me. Chief O gave me the name, right? And so I called him, and the guy called me back. He was very, very friendly. Oh, Chief, I remember you from South Carolina. When you and I used to go to South Carolina show and all that. Make a long story short, he did great. He and I drove down a couple of times. Brian, remember driving down for the interview? 12-hour drive down. Got in early at 5 a.m., got in a hotel room, jumped in, grabbed the bed, got some sleep. He got up at 7 o'clock for his whatever it was, 7:30, 8 o'clock interview. Out the door he goes. I go back to bed. 20 minutes later, he's back in the room. I'm like, what happened? He said, that was the interview. It's over. We got back in the car and we drove home. It was, and obviously things went really well for him there. But, I was very, very proud. And I went down. It was, plus his, swearing in and all that. It was fun.
Well, and Brian and Terry's going to jump in there as well in a second. But Brian, when did you know? I always ask this when I have a chance to visit with firefighters, guys and gals whose mom or dad are firefighters. There's got to be a point where you went, you know what, I want to do this now. When did that hit you?
I tried a couple times throughout, right when I graduated high school, and I took the FDNY test. I think 2 or 3 times, and it wasn't really working. So, unfortunately, with the point system and everything like that, so I started looking around other places and talked to my dad, and that's when I guess he talked to some people. They said North Charleston might be the spot to go to if I'm trying to go south. So that was really it. It was a quick process. So.
Oh, and now you're on the heavy rescue, or are you on engine, or?
No, I'm on an engine.
Engine, okay.
With the rescue's with him, so he gets a ride on it once in a while, across the floor.
Very cool. And he's married to a police officer now, so we're keeping public safety in the family.
Oh.
So hey, so Scott, you had it nice because the way it worked out for you. You got in the Metroplex there. If we draw that little triangle. We've got the Colony, which is booming, and then you've got one son in Dallas and one in Arlington. Was there anyone else maybe in between you could get somewhere? Is there a nephew or somebody you can? Because if we want to do the diamond, we're going to have to get somebody down south, maybe in Grand Prairie or somewhere like that.
Gavin's coming up, but Garrett actually went up and took the FDNY test also and gave that a shot, and of course made a 97 and was like 11,000th on the list. No, it's great having them close, and you buff a little and you get to listen to stuff, and if I hear a big fire working in Dallas or in Arlington, I may take a ride, and sometimes that's just part of it.
Well, remember how important it was when we were working together. T, you remember this? Whenever we had a photographer there, if we could, like the Wardlaws, I remember I was so excited to get them where they didn't pose for it. It's cool to pose like hey, this kind of thing after a good job, but. Remember, Terry, they were working, and Scott, you were actually, I think you were there then, to be able to get that shot of both of them at the same job, the same fire, because those are rare. You see it sometimes, even in a big city, Chicago, New York, and at Dallas, Arlington, it's hard because there's so many different companies. Not everybody's at the same fires. To capture that moment was pretty cool. T, go ahead, but
I was just gonna ask because I've kind of heard. Scott and I spend a lot of problem solving time together at some of the local establishments, but so I've lived vicariously through Braden and Garrett because I can't and I think those guys probably understand, but you have no idea how proud your dad is of you, and it has been all along. I think the following in his footsteps or being firefighters, I think, is icing on the cake, but we've all kind of lived, or we hear all of what's gone on, and then of course to get where you are today. So, but I still hear those. But I guess what I wanted to ask, and I think it's really challenging for all three of you to step out and be on your own, because your fathers are so connected in the fire service through training, and I mean, I mean, not to, the simple way to put it, I mean, they're the rock stars of this industry. They got books out. They're on the lecture circuit. They're certainly out there. I know your dad, Braden, and Garrett, your dad has told me a few very funny stories. Of you trying to, I mean, you're trying to step out and forge your own way, but it's a bit challenging, I would imagine. Braden, your dad told me a really funny story about a call that you were on, and a comment that was made that you were bred for this kind of work because it's in your lineage. But what's that challenge been like for you guys to be your own person in this business?
Well, yeah, I think that's exactly it. It took a while for people to realize who my father was. I mean, it's a big department in Dallas, 2,000 members, but he has made a great reputation for himself. And when people compare me to him, it's the greatest compliment, but the biggest insult, because you do want to be your own man. But at the end of the day, I don't think you realize how proud we are of him as well. So, it is good. And then I'll run into somebody that he taught at the fire academy back when they were rookies, and now they're a lieutenant, and they're like, "Oh, you're Scott Thompson's son." Well, absolutely I am. But, at the end of the day, you do want to be your own man. But I am very proud that I do get to have that lineage to a certain point.
Well, it's kind of like that movie. What was it? Rocky Balboa, where his kid halfway through it saying you cast kind of a large shadow, and that's why I was kind of going, because John and I have talked about in class before. It's hard, and no matter how you paint the picture. I was just wondering. I want to throw a congratulations. First of all, I don't want to forget to say hi to Brad Hoff up in Alaska. One of our brothers. We get to visit with him quite a bit. But congratulations to Cassidy. She got hired with Clark County FD, that's in Las Vegas, and her dad's there. And they just posted a picture yesterday. I thought that was pretty cool to see father-daughter, working on the same job, which there's so many of them out there. I mentioned the sisters in Jersey City, the battalion chief and the firefighter. Is so cool to see that. But, to have that happen, and again, to have people kind of throw some things around there, it's almost becomes, and I've always thought about that, like, God, what do you do? It's got to be so much easier just to come in, kind of do the Larry McCormick thing, John, with the FDNY, go there and nobody knows he's a firefighter, and he scores number one in the academy, and to kind of come in there and go, yeah. You almost want to well, look at Bruce Springsteen's kid, when he went through the academy in New Jersey, Anthony Avillo and the director, only two that knew they changed his name. No one knew he was Springsteen. He's on Jersey City now. No one knew he was that's who it's until graduation. They're like, what a Springsteen? Bruce Springsteen's out there. Who's it? Oh, he must know someone. They changed his kid's name. Funny story. So a couple of weeks before they graduate, they have to go ride to companies, right? And Springsteen has a compound, I guess, out of the ocean, for what the story is. And they went there on an alarm, and they're at the gated community, and kind of like where John lives, where he's got a gated community around his compound. But but they pull up and they're trying to figure out the panel. It was one of those things, but sit up there and don't get off the rig, kid, until I tell you to, from the officer. And one of the security guys goes, hey, what are you doing up there? And he goes, oh, just getting out of the academy. He goes, oh, great. He goes, why don't you ask him? He lives here. And the captain goes, you live here? He goes, yeah, my dad owns all this. It was kind of like, talk about casting a big shadow. But but I will say this, and we're dealing with two incredible reputations where Terry was going with this too, with Chief Thompson and Chief Salka. I remember, and John, you've heard me tell this story 100 times. I remember when I was little, I was in grade school, and I wanted the fire department to come, come do a talk for my class, and I wanted it to be my dad. And that day they said they're coming, and my dad didn't walk in. Captain Kurzrock came in, and I loved Captain Kurzrock. He was cool. And I wanted my dad, and he started talking, and he was going, and all of a sudden he goes, Ricky. And he points, he goes, Ricky. And he goes to the rest of the class, he goes, his dad's a good fireman. And I never knew till recently, years, what that meant in the way of a compliment for my dad. Nowadays we say he or she's a good firefighter. She's a good firefighter. He's a good firefighter. As an officer, the compliment, I follow him or her anywhere. I never realized that. And I, at the same time, I thought that was pretty cool, to be walking that way and doing that, and seeing that coming on the horizon. Let me ask you this, John, and then we'll go to Scott. What advice, John, and then we'll throw it towards Scott. What advice did you give Brian, when he began testing, like, okay, hey, this is what's getting, what did you say to him through the whole process till he got on board?
I mean, he really didn't. I don't want to say he really didn't need much advice, because everybody can, always take a little bit of advice, especially from somebody maybe that's been through stuff before. But basically, just keep your mouth shut. And if they don't know you when it's over, if they don't know you when it's over, you're done good. You know what I'm saying? Like, I knew he was going to try hard and well. He was in the Marines, but obviously he was like that before he was in the Marine. And then we heard stories from him once he was going through the academy there about, a couple of there's always a couple of guys dragging their feet, and that everybody else has to get after. And he was one of the guys. Him and a couple of the other guys were the ones poking the draggers. The guys that are doing the least and stuff like that. So I must admit, I didn't have to tell him much, which was also great. I also felt real good because what's his name? You mentioned earlier. He's a training captain, right, Brian? He's a training captain now. I didn't bother him at all. Once Brian got on the job, I didn't make any phone calls. How's he doing? What's he doing? Where's he going? I wasn't getting involved in any of that. But once in a while, I would see him or talk to him, and he'd say, "Oh, he's doing great. He's doing great." And a couple of times in the academy, none of the students knew who he was, because none of the students know who I am. They're all brand new young guys that were UPS men or whatever they were before they got in the fire department, probably. But a couple of the instructors said, "You're a stalker from New York," and he's like, and Brian is like, as you can see how talkative he is right now. That's how he is all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like, he doesn't talk a lot, which is, I think that's a really good personal trait, both on and off the job,
Well,
Yeah, but you know what, Chief? You remember, and it's happened a bunch. And Scott, I don't know if you've dealt with this, but from my experience when I've done backgrounds on people, that I certainly don't want to hear from a parent in general. I certainly don't want to hear from a parent that's in the fire business of a call and on the pretense or on the chance that you're trying to do good for your child. But listen, we need to hire problem solvers. We need to hire people who can come in here and they're going to be solving other people's problems. And what I don't want to do is hire a person who has to have a problem solver in their back pocket. And I always know the intention is good. And you think that because, Chief, I know you've dealt with this, we give a test, and then you'll get a phone call or an email from somebody. It's a parent, it's a mother. I just want to call and talk to you about my kid and tell you that, he's, and you're like, listen, this is absolutely the worst thing you can do for your kid. Right, Chief?
Like, everybody loves Raymond, right? With his mother. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It was the FBI, Mom. I wasn't applying for a job at the Gap,
And it was hard to do. I must tell you, it was hard to do because you so much wanted to help or wanted to just drop a good piece of information but I said, he's going to make it all on his own. And I, of course, I knew he was going to. And, probably did better than what I would have done.
Well, and we've talked about this on this show before. I never minded, and Scott, with all the hiring you do, and Terry, I always looked for, I appreciated a quick email or a message from someone I knew saying, "Hey, just want to give you a heads up. You got a good young man, good young lady coming through your process." Okay, cool. Just, that's a reference. There's nobody asking that, "Hey, I'm asking for a favor." Just a little heads up. And I always appreciated that to know when I was trying to hire, I'm trying to hire fire chiefs for certain places where people go, "Hey, I got an assistant chief that's going to be applying. That guy is dynamite." Just, if you'll make your own mind up, but you'll be pleasantly surprised. Scott, what advice did you give? Because I got a question for Garrett after this, but what advice did you give Braden and Garrett when they were,
Rick, very similar to what John said. Both of them will tell you they were probably on the job 6+ months before anybody knew the connection. But they did their own thing. I never made any phone calls. I never wrote any letters. I did go to a couple like John said, we went down to Austin for an interview, rode along, and went with Braden to some of his physical stuff. But they did their own thing. I think the advice that maybe I tried to give them was a whole thing, the job's going to be what you make it. And, don't get sucked into some of these guys who don't like the job. And sometimes you're going to be alone, but keep the passion. And then they started going to a lot of these outside training things and kind of developing their own network. But I didn't have to give them a lot. I think they were just around it, and they knew that they go in and they're the first one to get up, the last one to sit down. You don't take the chair facing the TV, and if you're not working, you're studying. And I've had some of their captains call me and other firemen and say, hey, they're doing great jobs and stuff. So yeah, just kind of letting them do their own thing. But I really didn't do much either, to be honest with you.
Well, part of that
Braden
too.
and Garrett, have you read the book? Come on now.
Of course.
All right. Brian, what about you? You got some books there in your house? Have you read them?
Oh yeah, I got a bunch.
We always do our shameless plugs for first in, last out.
Hey, I got to tell you though, I made a point of giving Brian the Pass It On books from all those different authors, right? I mean, how many guys are in each of those books? There's 3 of them now. I think he just did the last one, Billy. And there it is right there. That's number 3. We were just down there. I just gave him that last one. And I said, man, if you just read this and just you pull one little point out of each one of these guys that's printing a couple of pages, writing a couple of pages in there. Great stuff in there. Great stuff in those books. And it's not even a story. You don't even have to finish the book. You can open it up, flip through, and say, let me read this one today. And they're all like 3 pages long. So it's great inspirational stuff for everybody, but young guys, too.
Well, and I know everybody's read the Functional Fire Company too, but it's another shameless plug for Scott's Way. Terry, that was a great point you made before. I didn't want to get too far from that about the phone calls and all that stuff. There's the surprise witness as it is, of somebody you've never met, no one you don't trust. Because we've had people. How about this? How about the fire chiefs, Terry, that send you the emails blasting someone because they found out they're leaving their department. And I've had that 2 or 3 times, which I totally lost respect for those bosses doing that. It's like, hey, if they want to leave, they want to leave. That kind of question for Garrett, and then maybe Braden too, and then definitely Brian too. But Garrett, what advice would you give? And I guess this would be great to hear from, like I said, from Braden and then from Brian. What advice would you give? There's a lot of firefighters, a lot of guys and gals whose sons and daughters are considering or about to start testing or moving into the fire service. We heard about the advice from the dads, like we've heard advice from moms before. What advice would you give, being the son of a firefighter, to someone that said, hey, I'm thinking about, getting on a job. My dad's on a job. My mom's on a job. What would you say to them?
Well, I mean, and it's already kind of been echoed about maybe the challenges you would face being in the shadow of that parent, mom, dad, whoever. So, kind of what I did, I don't know if it was really intentional. I was able to get a job on the west side of the Metroplex first, which wasn't really tapped into by my dad's, he didn't really have a whole lot of influence over that side. So I was able to kind of fly under the radar for a while, which I think really helped me because, the last thing you want to do is go in and this is who I am. This is my dad. This is, he does all these things. Nobody wants to hear about that anyways. So I was kind of able to go and do my own thing for a little bit. Smaller department. I got hired on young. And then getting hired on Arlington, the same thing. You just kind of got to make your own name. It doesn't really matter, who you are, where you come from, because those guys don't care about it to begin with anyways. If they do find out, they'll make sure you know that. But yeah, he likes to say he never pushed us, but he definitely knew all the right things to show us and all the right people to put us around. So, that would just be my advice is just stay humble, stay quiet, try to work hard and make your own name. I hope I was able to do that. I feel like I was able to get a good start. So.
Well, Rick, I worked for Arlington for a little bit, so it's even worse on him. I was training chief for a while, so that was. And by the way,
good Lord, there's so few departments that you haven't worked for. I mean, let's just be honest here.
Hey, Rick, did you hear me say that Garrett's working with Cody now? They're in the same firehouse, Cody Allison.
Really?
Cody's my lieutenant. So
Yeah.
you mentioned his dad earlier and having him on here. So that's another cool little connection. We're working.
One of my favorite captains in the whole wide world, man. He's when I put the company officer slide up in Pride and Ownership, his picture pops up there. He's one of my favorite people. I think the common theme here from John and Scott, and then I just heard it from Braden, and then Brian had talked about, or Garrett talked about, Braden, is the work ethic, keeping your mouth. Look, I think it's a disservice for a mom or dad not to pass along the advice, not to say, hey, let's talk about the interview. Let's talk about, if you worked for Lockheed Martin, you'd be helping your kid prep. That's a good mom, a good dad helping them. It's not like here the answer is go cheat. It's let's get you set. This, that's like a parent saying, get ready for the physical ability. We're going to go out. I got this railroad tie. Here's a sledgehammer. We can practice the Kaiser 4. Helping. I think it would be a disservice, the wrong thing, to not help your kid out to make a point that they got to know in the way of preparing for it, like you would anything else. But Braden, same question. And I know a lot of things are repeating. Is there anything that pops in your head that maybe advice you would give to someone who's looking to pursue, whose mom or dad's on the job, that maybe, your brother didn't say already?
Well, absolutely. In fact, I'm going to reference something my dad tells me all the time is, I'll come home and, you had your good days and your bad days, and I'll be complaining about something that I really don't need to be complaining about. And he'll look at me and say, hey, you got to go to work and ride on a big red fire truck. It can't get any better than that. And I'll say that, just, realize why you got onto the job and why you want to get onto the job in the first place. And just remember that they're going to have your highs and your lows. And at the end of the day, you get to ride a big red fire truck, and that's all you can really ask for.
It's the dream come true. I mean, and I think sometimes for family members, I think that's overlooked because they grew up in the firehouse, like John said, to jumping in the volley car. And, Lewisville, we were very good about, our bosses were very good about, if you're going to go to fires, you have to bring your family, and all that to have that, but at times, it's almost, sometimes there's not that edge, there's not that I really, really want that desire, I guess, that passion, where I think some of the utching from mom and dad has to be there. Brian, what advice would you give someone, that was thinking about following mom or dad's footsteps?
Everything, obviously, that everybody's been saying is all real good advice. I would probably say just keep, try to be your own person, like everybody's been saying. They didn't even have, similar to spring team, they didn't keep my name on my helmet when I was in recruit school. They gave me a different name, which doesn't matter. We're a very small department anyway, but some people knew. And, the guys that bust my balls, they call me John at the firehouse. They don't call me Brian. So I would just stick with, once you get in, get with the good guys. I got a really, really good, strong crew of good men from the engine and the rescue, and we train and we learn every day. So I would just try to link up with some good guys and get some experience and keep learning.
Well, I think a lot of it helps for those that not everybody can, and it's not a way of life for everyone, but past military experience helps, I think, prime a lot of people for good stuff too, getting in that regiment. Hell, it helped my son just out of college to get him prepared for life in general to be part of that. But Terry and I will throw at John and Scott both. We've been talking about all the great things and the advice that you would give, and a couple things to do and think about. There's good and bad. John, you and I talked about this in class. There's good and bad of having. We've talked a lot about the good about having family in the fire service. Some of the bad, without mentioning names, there's some examples we use when it comes to someone's kid getting on a job where it. And I guess in asking you this, John, this might help some people avoid some of these landmines out there, right? Well, talk about that for a second, some of the downsides of it, or how that could be.
Yeah. Well, everybody probably has a story. All you guys probably have a story about this, but I remember one time a kid, showed up at the firehouse, and he was, his dad had actually worked in my firehouse 20 years earlier. And he was wearing his father's old, jacket into the firehouse. The guy's like, where'd you get that? Oh, it's my father's. A couple of them told him, take that off. That's your father's jacket. You got to have your own jacket. You got to break yourself in here, And anyway, he wasn't a terrible guy, but he was a terrible fireman. And, he knew everything. He had an answer for everything. Yep, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. And all that other stuff. And, even if you do know it, like you mentioned Larry before, or anybody else who was maybe in a smaller department or a different department before you went somewhere else, you still go through the academy, writing stuff down, 50-foot hoses, 50-foot, okay, 50-foot. You never say, I know, even if you do know it, you know what I'm saying? And this kid, I guess his dad didn't break him in or didn't let him know or whatever it was, but just wasn't a real popular guy in the firehouse. He actually ended up leaving. He ended up after a year and a half going somewhere else, which was, wasn't.
What do you call that? You always call that what, daddy time or something like that?
Yeah, but daddy time doesn't mean it's bad. Some guys come in, their father was on a job, and you know it, and you're like, wow, I would rather have him than his father. You know what I'm saying? But some guys come in and they're just lumps. It's just.
Well, and I have to tell this story, and we've done this before. And Terry, I think you've heard it. I don't know if Scott has and the boys, but perfect scenario about coming in and keeping your mouth shut, busting your ass, being that guy or gal that comes in, you earn your own keep, you earn your own, and Tommy Woods, good guy, good friend of our friend Chief John Salka. His son gets hired. He gets to the FTY, he gets the 45 engine, 58 trucks firehouse. And so, like as John would say, they show up and they do their whole, they're not even, it's the Rad Academy, this is your firehouse, and they spend a day and all this. And there's a point where they say, okay, we're going to take your picture in front of the firehouse. So there's these three guys, and it's a great picture. I've seen the picture, and they come out on the apron, stand in front of the firehouse. So you've got one of the other FDY guys
with the door open and the rig and all,
door open in the rigs, and he's backing up with the camera, backing up. He's kind of out of the street. He wants guys squeeze in there. And what you don't see are the three guys above him on the second floor with buckets of water. All right. Just kind of a little initiation thing. And as they dump the water, right, John, they snap the picture when the water's like right about here, right? And in that picture, you see Tommy's son's in the middle. The other two firefighters on each other like this, and Tommy Woods' son's like this. Because he knows what's coming. He knows and he didn't say a word. He just, he just went through the emotions. It's like nobody said nothing to him. It's like, yeah, I appreciate that. Great. He knew it was coming. And again, he kept his mouth shut. Good, strong work ethic. But so good and bad. Again, and Terry, you've been doing a lot of hiring. When I was there as a division chief over our bomb and arson division, you did all our, not only everything else you did, but you did the IAs when something went wrong, and you did all the backgrounds. And I brag, I think Lewisville, Texas has one of the best background / hiring processes in the country. You and Mark Richards that came in after you, and again, we were blessed. I had some great bosses. Claude was a great city manager, really helped us build that fire department and get it going places and that. A build on top of what was already there, I should say. I never bought into the nepotism policy there, because the excuse I would get would be, well, there's going to be favoritism if so-and-so's kid's on this shift or whatever, and they're going to be, I'm like, I think those days, if you had maybe a real small department somewhere and it's hard, I thought we passed on these great candidates that we couldn't have in our process or guys they would choose, okay, I'm going to retire because my kid's going to get hired, and I think we lost out on some good candidates. I don't know if agree or disagree, Terry. What are your thoughts on that?
I would like to see us get away from it. It's still in place to this day, and it's unfortunate. I like to think that we are well-paid problem solvers. I use that term a lot. I used it earlier in the show, and I would like to think that we can manage. We manage a lot of very complex, dangerous things on a daily basis. And I would like to think that that's something we could certainly navigate. And I think in the size of our organization, both within the fire department and the city itself, we've got quite a few scenarios throughout the city where we have family members that work under this giant umbrella, but it certainly gets a lot harder and tighter within the fire department, police department, or something like that. I get what the potential problems are, but I think that I think it's a tremendous morale booster. I think it's something that would afford the opportunity for people to come through the same organization, I think is a tremendous thing. And you know what, Chief, there's always I guess everyone assumes that because you work at this organization, therefore you would throw favors, or the organization would throw favors to the next person that comes in line. Well, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe you weren't such a rock star to begin with, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and that works two ways. I think it's I would love to have that problem to navigate. I really would, because I think that it would add. And I think Scott would probably agree with that. I think John would agree with that when you look at the opportunity to bring or have that opportunity to have somebody that's that close to come in, because I can tell you for sure Scott Thompson would hold his kids. I did a terrible job of being that little league coach for my own kids, because I was 9 times harder on them than I was on anybody else. And I think they suffered that trauma their entire life. And I think that's the way that it would be here as well.
Well, we hire firefighters, brand new firefighters that don't have anyone. They've never even talked to a firefighter before, and they end up being a challenge, and they end up being difficult, or they end up moving down the road, let alone whether it's someone's kid. Scott, you do. Hang on one sec, John. Scott, you do a lot of hiring as well. Just your thoughts, and again, whatever it is on being able to hire.
To ask Scott, does he have the same policy? Scott, are you limited? Can you hire sons and brothers? And
yeah, we're kind of in the middle. We have a couple brothers together, but like I couldn't hire either one of my sons. It's a supervisory thing. We can't have a supervisor over a family member, but I do have some brothers and that work in the department. So it's kind of a case by case thing, but we got to manage it.
Well, and I can see that a lot of places. We know that, okay, if you're the chief of department, that you can't hire your kid, and that comes with the, hey, you're going to wear the 5 trumpets or whatever, and that kind of stuff. I know in Lewisville, especially on the police department side, Terry, that whole, well, we can put them in let's say male, female end up getting married even, and now we got to move him or her off patrol and put them in a different division. It's like, if you didn't have a bigger department, how do you, in some cases they've had to quit, go work for other departments, T.
Hey, do you remember that story? It might have been in the great nation of Texas. It was, I bust his chops all the time because you put your flag up with the American flag. But it was his fire chief somewhere in a small department, and a firefighter of his met and fell in love with his daughter. The firefighter married his daughter, and the city manager said, one of you's got to go. We're either firing him or you got to retire. And the fire chief retired, if I remember correctly. They may have won it in court and maybe he went back or something, but can you imagine that? Somebody marries into your family. The guy isn't even your son. He's your son-in-law, and don't want to restrict it. That's a bad story. And here's a great one, and I'll make it short. There was a guy in the FDNY, and of course, a big job like the FDNY or Dallas or Chicago. There's so many guys. You could have a brother on a job and never even be within 100 miles of him on duty, right? But in the FDNY about 5 or 10 years ago, an old Irish lieutenant was retiring, and they put the picture in the WNYF magazine. His last night, he had 4 sons on the job. His last night, all of his sons made sure they went to work the same night that their dad was working his last night. And with the battalions and the divisions and everybody, they detailed all his sons to his company. And he rode with his son driving and his 3 sons in the crew compartment his last night on the job. And they got a great picture of that. And that, I don't know how many times that's happened on a planet. That's a pretty cool thing,
Terry, do you have something?
No, I think that, it's, we talk a lot about, it's about family, and it is. And I think that, man, you're looking at it, this show's all about that. And that's 3 outstanding individuals who are embarking on the front end of what will be a tremendous and fantastic career. And everyone on the show can speak back to, I've got a son and a daughter. I don't in any way push or try to push them into this. I think it's, I told my son, because we went down this road where, the high school programs that start now that are fantastic and give a person an opportunity to get started very young in this profession. And so I took my son to that orientation, and I could tell it was uneasy for him the whole way as a sophomore in high school. And I think that in his head, he's trying to play up this, man, how do I let this dude down? This is not what I want to do. And so we went to the orientation and leaving that, it's just one of those things as a parent, you could tell, something wasn't clicking with him. And so, when we finally got to that point where I said, hey, Tyler, what's going on? What do you think, man? This is, you give it to him, but what do you think? This is awesome, right? This is, man, look at you. This would be fantastic for you. And he kind of gives me that, staring at the dashboard straight ahead, and it's now or never, Tyler. I gotta let him down. And he tells me, he said, listen, I don't know if this is for me. And my thing with him is that, man, listen, this has a huge cost of failure that goes along with this job. And the last thing I want you to do is to do something because it's what I want. You could tell he just was like overwhelmed with happiness because he didn't have to fight that battle with me, because I wasn't going to be, hey, this is, I made a great living doing this, and you're going to make a great living doing this too. And so, and I think that's something that my daughter, when she was 10 years old, got in a car one time. And as a parent, you want to fix everything, and to find that balance someday where, getting back to that, making phone calls and trying to do things on behalf of your kids. But my daughter got in the car, so I was like, hey, what's wrong? And she kind of gave it the whole, I don't want to talk about it. And, being the great parent that I am and was, I was like, oh, we're not having any of that, because I'm a problem solver and I'm fixing to solve your problem. So I stayed on her and stayed on her and stayed on her. And so finally she looked at me at 10 years old. She looked at me and she said, all right, I'm going to tell you, but I don't want you to fix anything. I just want to tell you what the problem is. And you know what? That stayed with me for a long time. And I think right now, as a parent, as Chief Salka, if his son shares something with him that, hey, there's something going on in this fire department, or there's an issue. And so you've got all this experience and FDNY and whatever, and the control that you have to start exercising to say, this is not my world. This is not my problem to fix anymore. And the best thing I can do is just listen and don't fix it. And I think there's a lot to that. And
Terry, you bring up a good point, and that's probably the biggest downside that I see. I mean, these guys through their career so far have been to a lot of houses, and some really good ones, and some, when you hear the stories, you're going. And John, if you remember, we had a conversation casual. I was telling you about some of this, but you hear what's going on, and being a fire chief, I have standards for our organization, and you hear they may get caught in one of these firehouses, even if for a short time, and you're going, my gosh, there's no training, there's no leadership, there's no direction, and you want to reach out and grab the captain or lieutenant. Of course, you can't do that because that's a death sentence. Or you want to try to coach them to, but you really got to let them solve their own problems. And to me, that's the toughest part of this relationship, is knowing that they're in not maybe a toxic environment, but a dangerous environment, and there's not really a lot you can do other than try to just coach them through it. So to me, that's probably one of the tougher things.
Well, and you're always walking that. Hang on a second, John. You're always walking that fine line that Terry said, where you want to ut your kid, you want to dangle, the opportunities in life, and kind of you throw something out there and you see if it takes, and then but that's that line like Terry was talking about. That do I push like I said earlier? Do you want your kid to go play ball at Alabama, or do you want them to get an education, and do you want them to actually play? Let them go with it and do what they're going to do and be happy. But go ahead, John.
Well, the point I wanted to make was just what I've been hearing, what you guys have been saying, and it's the same for firemen and a lot of other people too, chiefs. Like, I can't tell you how many times I discovered stuff or heard stuff from firefighters or officers, in my career, when I was in the 18th Battalion, that I did absolutely nothing about, because it was something that was going on in the 2-0 battalion. The 2-0 battalion's got a commander and 3 chiefs, just like I do, all good, qualified people, great company officers. And you know what? I don't want to say it went in one ear and out the other, but it didn't come out of my mouth anywhere. I heard it, and whoever it was that told me, I said, wow, that's, crappy or shitty, or they shouldn't be doing that, or oh, I can't believe that's allowed, or whatever it is. And I say the same thing for young firefighters. You might see some stuff going on somewhere, whether it's on your shift or maybe the folks in the firehouse or in the company that are with you. I said, you just worry about yourself. And it sounds selfish and it sounds self-serving, but I don't think it is. I think it's a good survival technique for good young firefighters to keep focused on themselves and their company and their shift and their officer. And do you want to die on that hill? How many times do we say that, Rick? Do you want to die on that hill? Sometimes you just got to let stuff pass by and say, gee, I'm glad I'm not like that. I'm glad we turn out fast. I'm glad we wear all our gear all the time. I'm glad we get a tool in our hand every time we get off the rig. And, my guys in the volleys here do it because I managed to, figure out some combination, a couple of combinations of ways of telling people what you wanted to do. But yeah, you can't solve every problem. And like you said, that's a death sentence. You get some young guy, talking to other officers or reporting stuff to somebody. And, listen, it's a hard thing to say to let stuff that's not supposed to be done, to let it continue. But I think you got to concentrate on your world and let those folks concentrate on their world, and then maybe fix their own problems. It sounds terrible, but I really truly believe in that I think you got to, keep to yourself, keep to your shift and your company. And, maybe when you get in a bigger, higher position, you can have a better influence on other people, but you can't be trying to solve other battalions and other departments and other firehouse problems.
Well, and I want to go exactly, John, what you're saying, and go back to the point that coupled with that was what Scott said about you want to say something, but you can't. Let's throw this out there for some of our viewers, and those are going to watch this later on as a taped session. They're not live right now. And I've used this a lot of times in classes about whose kids crawling into a burning building with you. And the story I have is sitting in my office, and one of my captains, I won't say who, comes in, sits down, and I always talk about, you can always tell when a male they're trying not to cry. They get the big eyes, right? When a guy tries not to cry, he's doing this. He's like, and he's, you can see it welling up. And I'm like, what's wrong? And he's like, and he didn't want, and he goes, I'm worried about my boy. And I said, what do you mean? We were just out there. Daryl Brown and I drove 3 hours and 45 minutes to watch a month earlier to watch the swearing-in ceremony, watch him pin the badge on his kid and all this. We were excited, went in our Class A's and all that for a 40-minute ceremony. It was awesome. I go, we were just there. He goes, yeah, well, I just went the other day and rode out with his company. I met his captain. And I said, and he goes, I'm worried about my boy, Chief. He goes, this guy don't train. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. He doesn't. And we talked just like, John, what you said and what Scott said about how to deal with that is that, what's right. We all deal with line of duty deaths and the investigations. And we go afterwards and teach and do corrections and all this stuff. And you're seeing all these things you read in these reports about poor leadership and poor bosses and not, their training failing, and it was a tough thing. And the question I asked him, so whose kids crawling into a burning building with you? Meaning to the company officers and future company officers that are out there listening to this right now, what are you doing to train your people? When you get that brand new firefighter, someone's kid or not, are you killing the enthusiasm? Are you killing off that energy? Are you just sit down, shut up, we're not going to train? You see this so often where these young firefighters come in, they're full of energy, and a year later it's all gone because they've worked for some bad boss. So I just think, John and Scott, those were great points about, look, and I just want to bring that up to some of these people out there that may not have a kid in the fire service. Remember whose kids crawling into a burning building with you. I mean,
and it don't take long to turn a good kid, a good recruit firefighter, into a slug on the couch watching, The View.
Exactly. Well, so let's throw this question. We got a few minutes left, Harry. Let's throw this question to, excuse me, Garrett and Braden first, then Brian. And maybe nobody did, but did anybody try to talk you out of becoming a firefighter? Did anybody say, oh God, dude, you don't want to do that? There are places that go, I've heard people say it, excuse me, my kid will never be a firefighter. They're on the job and they say, my kid will never be a firefighter, never be a cop or whatever. I've heard that before, but to Garrett and Braden, did anybody try to talk you out of it, or did it was there the support all the way?
I can honestly say, being around nobody but my dad's friends growing up, nobody ever said that to me. So
Mike Arrigo and some of the other characters.
not one of them. No. And I can say the same. No one ever really drove me away from it or toward it. Just being around it my whole life, I just knew it was something that I wanted. Just seeing the passion between him and when I grew up around, and I knew it's what I wanted to do.
Well, and like I said, to some of these dads and moms, I don't want my kid to be a firefighter. I think a lot of it comes down to they're not happy where they're at. And I'm like John always says, there's almost 40,000 fire departments. Granted, 80% are volunteer. There's a ton of fire departments out there. There's a ton of opportunities to go and have this incredible career. Like you were saying, Terry, just this incredible opportunity. Brian, did anybody try to talk you out of it?
No, nobody tried to talk me out of it before. I've been around. I mean, obviously my dad and his friends too, and they've always said the best job in the world. And the only time really negative things came about it is, well, there's negative people everywhere in every department. You get on and they get in, you're happy to be there, and they're, oh yeah, give it a year. And I was quiet. I took that advice, just shut up. But you want to say you don't want to be here, leave, please. You're not helping anybody. But yeah, other than that, nobody tried to discourage me from joining.
Well, and real quick to the three of you, to Brian and excuse me, Braden and Garrett, I apologize about that. During the interview process, the oral interviews when you were getting hired, was it brought up? Was it either the question, what got you interested in the fire service, or did they bring up, do you have any family in the fire service, something like that? Was that, throw that to Garrett and Braden first because you're off mute. Did anybody ask you that in the interview process, and how did you answer it?
In Dallas, I really don't recall that being a question. So no, not me personally. No,
Okay.
From what I remember, more scenario-based things. Give you a challenge that you kind of got to say how you would deal with it. So there were some interviews for jobs that I didn't get that, yes, that came up.
There you go.
Probably not the key ingredient there. So
there you go.
Oh God, that's perfect. Brian, did it come up at all?
Yeah, they just asked if I had any family members that were on job. So that was it.
You tell me I got a dad that kind of dabbled in it a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't mention anything else other than that.
Hey, Brian, that was that story I told you earlier that we drove down there and he was gone for like 20 minutes and he came back and it was over. I'm like, what? It's over? Was anybody in there? How many people? And tell me if you want to tell me. It was a little awkward. It was a little weird, that whole thing, like the attitude of some of the people and the vibes you were getting, and it wasn't a real positive experience. That, if I remember correctly, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I didn't think I got it. It was not everybody. It was a panel interview, and maybe five people in there, and I went in and shook everyone's hand, and some people didn't stand up, shake my hand. I mean, it was just maybe their interview tactics. I don't know, but I didn't think it went that well, but obviously it did because I got the job, so I'm not complaining there.
Well, some of that is those tactics. Terry knows that. We've talked about that with hiring processes where everything from you get one that's trying to be a good cop, bad cop kind of thing, and or they're purposely doing things to try to see how you relate to it. I know, Terry, how many times did I sit there with you in the panel where I'm like, I didn't say a word, and they got up and left, and I'm like, all right, how quick do we have to hire this person? At the same time, every now and then I'm like, over my dead body, are we hiring that person? But all good stuff. Hey, as things close out here, and Terry, I know Lewisville is always hiring. I think you're in the middle of a process, or you just done with it, right? T? Middle of a hiring process, or you just finish it?
Yeah, so we're hiring for 10 positions, and we just tested for 4 days. We had about 140 candidates, which for us is, we haven't seen those numbers in probably 6-7 years. So.
Okay. Hey, Brian, real quick, before we move on to Scott's Sons, if someone wanted to, it's, in North Charleston, South Carolina, 14 stations, right? 14 firehouses.
12 stations.
Okay. Are are you guys in the middle of hiring, or is it kind of on hold right now with everything? Or
There's a
No.
recruit school finishing up right now. Next maybe month or two, they should be finishing up. But I think after that, there might be a hold for a while.
okay, Garrett, Arlington, Texas, are they in the process, or we're trying to push it? We're trying to get you some more candidates, but is Arlington hiring? Or are they holding off, or?
Yeah, they're holding off right now. They put the recent process on hold completely, and I guess it could potentially get thrown out if it goes on past kind of the civil service deadline. So I'm hearing at least first of next year. So
Okay. Yeah, I know it's hard with budgets right now and everything. My soon-to-be son-in-law is looking to test, and he's finding out, several agencies in the Metroplex that are holding off. What about Dallas?
Send them over to Lewisville. You can send a recommendation along with them, you know?
What about Dallas Fire Rescue?
so with Dallas, we usually start the beginning of every year. Process just closed, but with the 2,000 member department, there's always going to be attrition. So typically they hire quite a few when it does open up, but usually the first of the year is when it opens.
Very cool. I'll be there next month for your union, 2 days doing pride and ownership. I'm excited to do that. I've done some other work with them before. They've had me come and do some company officer or some leadership stuff at their officers retreats and things like
That's
that.
a great thing they're doing with their union, bringing in people like that. That's great. They're doing some fantastic stuff through their union.
I'll be there.
So I'm excited. I'm excited to get there for the big D. That'll be fun. And well, all right. Hey, as we close things out here, to the two dads, Scott first and John, closing advice for someone. We've talked a lot about it today, but if you could kind of summarize for our listeners.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, easy. It says I'm muted now. Am I muted? Can you hear
No,
me?
you're good.
Okay. This is something that you and I talk about all the time, Rick, in our classes, and it applies to officers, applies to firefighters, applies to everything. You know what? If you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. You know what I'm saying? And if you think that in the morning when you're getting dressed in the firehouse, if you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. You can't go wrong. There's no way you can turn that into anything but good advice.
Outstanding. Scott?
I'm going to take a little different approach. I want to kind of appeal to those that are on the job. We sometimes hear these things about the kids coming on the job and what they can't do. And I think between Brian, Garrett, and Braden, they had a little exposure. But there's a lot of great kids out there who have tremendous potential. And just because mom and dad aren't on the job, they may be viewed different. That's where mentoring, I think, really comes in. So, I think we're sometimes too quick to write off this generation. And of course, I'm biased to them, and I'm sure Chief Salk's saying, but man, you just got to work with them just a little bit and help them get going, and things will take care of themselves. So I guess that's kind of what I want to finish. Let's don't be so quick to write off these kids coming on the job as not being capable, because they are, and we know that, and we have a little insight, but just work with them, mentor them, and coach them.
Well, those are two great points. And I've said about the generational stuff. Stop blaming generations. Stop blaming generations. We're hiring, as you want to call, kids that are incredible. Yet there's people in their 60s who are buttheads. You know what I'm saying? It's stop blaming generations. Lead them, train them, mentor them, and have a great time with it. So, hey guys, Terry, this was a great. Terry threw this topic out there about wanting to talk family to fire service. And we talk often about what we're going to talk about. And T was a great subject, buddy. Great pick for this one with some great guests.
Yeah, no, this was everything that I had hoped it would be. I feel bad, I guess, looking back over the last hour. I feel like we got into our trenches, and the three of you were incredibly patient. There might have been some eye rolls in there. I don't know, because maybe you've heard this 100 different times when all of us get on our different things, but it's and I say to the three of you, you have no idea how proud, because I've heard everywhere we go when you're not present, and the amount that Chief Thompson, Chief Salka have bragged on you, and for good reason. But the one thing as a parent, and I've heard it through all three of you. There we go. There's the next one. we've heard it, during this show, and that is, you forge your own way and make your own path, and all three of you have, and that's hard. That's hard for a parent. Garrett, I think you sit there with your child, and that's a hard thing to do for a parent to step back. But man, it's a lot of fun to watch when it works out, and it certainly has in this instance with the three of you. So thank you for your time, and thank you, fathers, for setting it up and getting him here today.
Well, it's fun to see, to haven't been able to witness everybody as young ones, and seeing where they're at now is always pretty cool. But there's tons of great men and women out there that are following their mom and dad's footsteps, and great representation. Battalion Commander Chief Salka of FDNY, Chief of South Bloomingdale Fire Department, with his son Brian Salka, firefighter with North Charleston, South Carolina. Chief Scott Thompson from the Colony, Texas, with Garrett Thompson, who's with Arlington, another large metro department out there, and Braden Thompson, a firefighter with a little department of Dallas with, I think, 58 stations or whatever it is. But guys, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome. Terry and I both really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
For having us. That was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian.
Perfect. Hey, everybody here is on one of the social media platforms, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or the web. You can zip over those if you need to get a hold of us. Terry is at tmcgrath@citylouisville.com. I'm at chieflasky@gmail.com. Our next Humpday Hangout we're always the third Wednesday with our show, Issues and Challenges with Terry and I, is July 15th. We're there. Fire Engineering always has some great shows, great radio, great podcasts in the evening, great Humpday Hangouts on Wednesdays. You can catch and interact with some great people. In closing, we just want to, Terry and I always say this, we want to ask you to please keep the men and women in our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And remember that never forgetting means never forgetting. Thank you. Be safe, and God bless you. Catch you next.